Since my wife and I got married 3 years ago, things have been off. I know that people grow and change with time, but around our wedding, my wife changed drastically. She bleached her dark brown hair blonde right before the ceremony. And I honestly thought I was in the wrong church for a split second when she came down the aisle. We moved into our house right after the honeymoon, and she went into full domestic mode. We'd shared cleaning duties before, but once we moved into the house, she became insistent on doing everything before I could even get to it. Since this is our first house, I thought it was some kind of homeowner nesting thing, but it never stopped. Her hair color is none of my business, and I think most people would be happy not to have to clean. So I honestly didn't really think much of either of those things at the time. The big thing has always been how closed off she got after the wedding. When we were dating, she'd tell me long rambling stories about her feelings and rant to me when she was upset and all that. And I liked hearing about what was going on inside her head. After the wedding, that stopped pretty abruptly. If I ask her how her day is, she will only ever tell me that it was fine or super. She doesn't talk to me about her feelings anymore, ever, even when I explicitly ask, "How do you feel about X?" She also stopped telling me about anything important that happened to her. About a year after we got married, her grandfather died. Did she tell me she'd lost her grandfather? No. She told me that she had to go to a conference for work on the other side of the country, which I thought nothing of. On the second day she was gone. Her older brother texted me to tell me that my in-laws had really missed seeing me at the funeral. When I called her to ask why in the ever-loving hell she didn't tell me, and then lied about it, all she would say was, "I didn't want to trouble you. You have a lot on your plate." After that, she went on a couple of spontaneous family trips. She's really close to her family, so the first time she said she was going camping with her brother at their alma mater. I didn't think a lot of it other than to be slightly disappointed and confused that I wasn't invited, because her brother's cool and the three of us go camping together a lot. But the second time, I started hearing alarm bells. I'd like to say I'm a more secure man, but after the second spontaneous family trip, my wheels started spinning and I started to think that maybe she was cheating. This was a weird insecurity in the back of my mind for a while, since she wasn't showing any other big signs of cheating. She wasn't guarded about her phone and hadn't changed her routine / appearance. A few weeks ago, she told me she was pregnant. I was over the moon about it until I asked her how many weeks along she was, and she nonchalantly said about 12 or 13. She'd been pregnant for like 3 months before she even bothered to tell me. She's not really showing at all, and she doesn't usually drink, so I had been completely in the bloody dark. I honestly hadn't even suspected. That was kind of it for me. I was sure she was cheating, and that it wasn't my kid. I thought there was no possible way that a woman would keep her pregnancy a secret from her husband for 3 months. So I snooped. Yes, I know I was wrong, but I wanted proof that she'd been having an affair before I moved out. One of my best buddies from college is a divorce attorney, and when I asked him what I should do, he sent me the info for a key logger. I installed it on my wife's laptop and was prepared for the worst. Now, I feel like what I found is somehow worse than her cheating. I didn't find any steamy messages, but I found out that she keeps a diary in a Word document that she writes in every day. I know I should have just stopped once I knew she wasn't cheating, but once I saw my name in her diary, I couldn't stop. I read all of it. All 7 separate documents, going back to way before we'd even met. Turns out she's not cheating. She's depressed, hates herself, and has absolutely no trust in me. All of the stuff I've been confused and bothered by has some kind of sad, self-loathing explanation. She hates having blonde hair, but she writes, "I know he'd divorce me if I went back to being a brunette. Because wives are supposed to be blonde almost every week." The "wives are supposed to be" thing is tangled up in everything. She thinks wives are supposed to be quiet, which is why she doesn't talk to me anymore. She thinks wives are supposed to make things easier for their husbands, not harder. Which is why she didn't tell me when her grandfather died. It just goes on and on and on. She didn't tell me when she got a huge promotion and a raise because he'd leave me in a heartbeat if he knew I made more money than he does. Men can't handle that. It hurt to know that she thinks of me as some kind of one-dimensional 1950s husband, and I've been racking my brain to think of anything I could have done to make her think this way. What I can't handle is that she'd lied about the big stuff. I honestly don't know if I can forgive her for not telling me about the miscarriages. The spontaneous family trips were actually her miscarrying 2 of our children, one at 5 weeks, the other at about 10. She went and stayed with her parents while she was recuperating, and her brother and sister came to support her. But not me. I didn't get to be there for her, because she thinks I would leave her immediately if I knew that she'd killed our children. She's convinced that she caused both miscarriages because she smoked pot for a long time before we got married. For what it's worth, it sounds like her family tried both times to get her to tell me, but she wouldn't. She finally told me about this pregnancy because her parents threatened to tell me she didn't. I'm just absolutely confused. I don't even know what to think right now. I'm just so baffled because everything she says about me in her diary is insanely nice. She goes on for pages and pages about how much she loves me and how she thinks I'm her soulmate and how she would do anything for me. I just can't understand why she thinks that I would leave her. Knowing that she's spent the last 3 years walking on eggshells around me, convinced that I would leave her at the drop of a hat is just so confusing and awful. I feel like our marriage is some kind of lie. The woman I thought was self-confident and ready to take on the world is actually full of self-loathing and really, really depressed. I don't know her at all. She's been suffering silently with depression long before we met. She has no faith in me, no trust. She thinks that every hug and kiss I give her and every "I love you" I say is a lie. I just don't know what to do. She obviously needs serious help, but I don't know how to get it for her. I can't tell her that I read her diary. If she has zero trust in me now, I can't even imagine what she'd think if she knew if I read 6 years worth of her private thoughts. I feel like I need to get my in-laws on board somehow, but I don't know what to say to them. I know I can't ignore this, but I feel like any move is the wrong move. I'm what the deaf, nonverbal audio classify as hard-hearing, HH. Because I can communicate with hearing person without resorting sign languages or notes. I met my boyfriend, Alan, who is deaf about a year ago. I was the only person he could communicate at work with ASL, even though I only could sign basic words. Later, he began to teach me in more advanced ASL and we found out we have so much in common in TV, movies, books, tastes with similar goals and desires in life that we became best friends that evolved into a romantic relationship. We're going strong 9 months now and we're compatible in every area. It's the best and healthiest relationship I ever had and I'm always excited and giddy to see him at work or when we wake up together. He feels the same and we're talking moving each other as soon his lease is up in 3 months from now. 2 months ago, we decided to meet each other parents which all are hearing. He's their only deaf son. Alan met mine and it went fabulous. Then we met his parents, Irma and Paul. I thought we got along because they were smiling, gushing and laughing, but I'm beginning to believe they were putting their best masks for the sake of their son. One time on a family's birthday parties, Irma said in front of the ladies with me next to her, "It's so impressive you can talk with that speech impediment. I barely can understand you myself." She said as jokingly manner, but no one laughed. Everyone glanced at each other awkwardly and I just stared at her. Then excused myself. At first I wasn't sure if she meant as generational ignorant way like, who's the woman in the relationship? To the gays. I didn't mention to my boyfriend because I was hoping it was only time remark. It wasn't. They made more comments, mostly Irma, about me struggling pronunciation or grammars, using sign language incorrectly and not teaching me the right one like Alan would do, or not having deaf//HH friends or not going more to deaf community and so on. It happened so gradual and subtle that I didn't realize they were being insulting to my face that to this day I still wonder. Most of the time they would make those comments without Alan nearby. I mentioned to Alan few times and he told me that maybe they were worried I might not understand the deaf culture. He talked to them that saying those things weren't helpful and he would appreciate if they would shut it up. They didn't. Few weeks ago at barbecue party, Irma and Paul sort of insinuated about my parent for not giving best tool for me, saying it was a shame that my parent didn't put me in deaf school or letting me to get cochlea implant or letting me to study abroad in non-deaf university program. They made it sound as if my parent crippled me as person because my social and emotional network didn't consist the right people. This time I got angry and I said what they said was rude. that my parents made lot sacrifice for me and no one has the right to belittle for their choices about raising me. Alan caught at the end of the conversation, lip reading, and asked me what's going on. Not so surprisingly, Alan's parent threw me under the bus, remarking I was so sensitive after making such innocuous comment. Alan saw I was uncomfortable and asked me if I want to leave. I said yes, and we left. When we got home he asked me what they said to me. I didn't want to say what his parent told me because it was so ugly to talk about it, but I told him anyway, and he got upset for me. He FaceTimed them and said they shouldn't said that. He told them they crossed the line. They pretended they didn't know what I was talking about, that perhaps I misunderstood, considering I'm hard-hearing, which upset Alan even more. They ended arguing for a few minutes before Alan hung up. Since then, Alan has become desolate and needy. He apologized to me hundreds of times for not believing me what I said before. I told them that he has nothing to apologize because I wasn't sure if they were being snide toward me until now, and I'm not going to blame Alan for what his parents said to me. He told me he's thinking reducing contact with them, but I told Alan it wasn't necessary. He can do whatever he wants with his parent, but that I rather would not go to any of his family gathering or go his parents. He assured he would never force me or put me in that situation ever again. We're closer together than we were, but he's still sad and he no longer goes to his family gatherings or his parents. I find him staring at nothing in particular for long minutes and his eyes, which used to sparkle, are now dim. I want to cheer him up, but I'm not so sure how to in first place. I just don't know what to do, and I don't understand why his parents are so rude toward me because I'm not completely deaf considering they aren't one. I met Jane through Joe's girlfriend at her birthday party last year. At first Jane was fun to talk to, but not even an hour later Jane was really into me and tried really badly to hit on me during the party, which pretty much ruined my time there as the feeling was not mutual in the slightest bit. Also at the time I was already with someone, so the first impression I got from Jane was that she was clingy, annoying, and just wouldn't stop bothering me. Unfortunately for me, she became part of my larger friend group because she is part of Joe's girlfriend's friend group. That is a mouthful, sheesh, and because me and Joe hang out a lot and I am also friends with his girlfriend, I pretty much run into her at minimum twice a month. So first time Jane asked me out was a month after that party. I informed her I was with someone and not interested. She tried again 2 months later when I broke up with my then girlfriend. Again I declined her advances and told her I was not interested. I got into a new relationship not long after, but unfortunately she and I broke up about 2 months ago. Since then, as you might have anticipated, Jane has asked me out again. I said no again. Well, that brings us to this week. Everything has been opening up here, and Joe had been trying to fix me up with a friend of his girlfriend and would not tell me who. He is well aware of me having rejected Jane multiple times and the fact I am not interested in her. He knows this in detail. After a lot of what he calls convincing and I call whining, I had no interest in dating anytime soon. I relented and decided to agree to this double date idea of his. We agree on meeting at Joe's apartment, and lo and behold, Joe, his girlfriend, and Jane are occupying the dinner table, obviously intending for my date to be Jane. I honestly just got so goddamn angry that I couldn't even get a single word out, turned around and left. I have been bombarded with texts and calls about how much of a douche I am and how terribly I hurt Jane and so on, and I am just like, I literally rejected her like 3 times. I am not interested in her. You knew that. Your girlfriend knew that. Our entire friend group has a running joke about obsessive Jane FFS, so literally everyone knows it. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing. But he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it. Especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place. And in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister. But it was for non-profit work making $22K year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity //equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen and we haven't really talked since yesterday.